service, right? And inside the employee human service, we have a coach, and we added the coach views over there, right? Like text boxes, text areas, and everything. But generally, I mean, in case whenever you're working in a project, yeah. So whenever you're working in a project, right? So what happens over there? We create a kind of layout, okay? And that layout is going to be a common layout for whatever human services you are creating. And using some dynamic visibility, we implement the layout for the different human services. So what happens as a result, whatever coach you are creating, right? One coach we are creating for the employee, another coach we are going to create for the manager, and say there are more human services we have to create for a process there, which means that those human services will also have a coach. So we need to create a layout which will be very similar, which we can implement for all the human services, for all the coaches, right? A common layout. So how to implement that, we are going to see that tomorrow. Tomorrow we are going to see the coach views and everything. Okay. So today let's implement the manager human service. Now the expectation in the manager human service would be whenever the employee submits the application form, right? Manager is going to see everything, whatever details has been submitted, but everything will be in read-only mode, right? Now, manager should not be able to change any details, whatever the employee has entered. And there would be two buttons, approve and reject, and the manager would use them to complete the or to take an action for the leave application that has been submitted by the employee. And whenever he takes an action, the the entire process also gets completed. So for the manager task, so last day I had seen how to create, last day I showed you how to create a human service from the activity wizard, right? So today we're going to create it from here. Okay. For the manager, I'm going to create it from the left hand side palette. From the user interface option, I'm going to create the click on the plus sign, and then I'm going to click on the client side human service. And here I'm going to name this as manager CSHS. Okay, manager client side human service. Now, this option, as we know, the first one we need to enable always. We need to enable this whenever we are client side human service. And if we want that this human service which we are creating, whatever coach we are going to implement, if that needs to be responsive, then we always need to enable the first option. Now, the second option, guys, we were not able to see the last time, right? Because we created from the activity wizard and use as a nested service option was not there, correct? So here it is coming because we are creating it from the left hand side palette. Now, what is this option? Use as a nested service. You remember when we discussed initially, when we were discussing about like what are the different kind of activities that we can implement in a process? We discussed about an activity called linked process. What is a linked process? Okay, just a moment. Let me ask this question to something is wrong. Let me ask this question to Parvez. What is a linked process?
Maybe a process within a processor, a sub process.
Sub process was again a different activity, right? So what is exactly a linked process? Calling another process, can I say that I have a parent process, and from the parent process, I want to call another process, and this can be done with the help of linked process activity, right?
Yes, sir.
Right, guys? Okay. Similar way, if I have to call another human service from a parent human service, then in that case, I have to enable this option as use as a nested service. Okay. Say this is a manager human service which we are creating. And now say from the manager human service, I want to call another human service. Maybe by calling that human service, I'm going to get some information from that human service. That's the reason, right? So whenever we have such kind of implementation, then in that case, the human service, which is getting called from the parent human service, I have to enable the option as use as a nested service. Okay. So for our implementation, whatever we are doing right now, this manager human service is going to be a parent human service for the manager task. So it is not going to be a called service. So I'm not going to enable this option for this human service. I will click on finish. This would create the manager human service for me. And again, the similar kind of things I'm able to see. I can see a start event, I can see a coach, I do see an end event, and I can also understand that inside a coach, I have a button called OK, right? Now, since we did not create this from the activity wizard, which means I have to go and create the variables, right? So guys, what kind of variable we should create here?
Input.
Right. So we need to create input variable. So the variable name I can provide as employee information. And this is right now string. I have already created a business object last day. So I'm going to click on select and just map this business object over here. Now, the question is whether we should need an output variable for this human service or not. Do
No,
we need
sir.
any output? Okay,
No,
we don't
sir.
need an,
Yeah,
yeah,
we need it.
yeah. So person who
We
is
need for
saying yes,
response.
yeah. So why do we need an output variable for this human service?
Uh, if we want to send it to for senior manager, we need it an output variable, right?
Yeah, in case we are want to send this to the senior manager. Now for
Or to
our
see the response or
implementation,
data at the end of the
right? So we don't have a manager, a senior manager human service or senior manager activity over here. We don't need. So in that case, do we need an output variable?
No, Rahul.
No, sir.
Okay. Everybody saying no.
Well, maybe we need it to
need
send
we
the
need
to send
output
the result to the employee.
at the
No.
end of
So
the
yeah. So let's understand the requirement, guys. So this manager task is going to be the last user activity for this process. I'm not going to send this to any senior manager. I'm not sending this back to the employee. So do we still need an output variable for this, for the last activity?
no.
No, Rahul.
All right. The answer is actually yes. We would need an output variable. Okay. Let's discuss why do we need an output variable still for this scenario. Now, manager task, guys, is going to be the last activity, right? Now, what happens? I'll give you another, just an idea. Like whenever some issue will come, okay, for for say an employee activity or for the manager activity, you want there is some issue, or even if there is no issue, say this is an instance. Whenever I run this process, an instance will be created, right? And I said you that from the process inspector we can inspect on the data which is getting processed in this entire process, right? Now this employee task, whenever this employee task is going to get completed, the data is going to move whatever I am processing in this human service. That data I am passing as an output from the employee task, and that data will be going to the manager task as an input, right? Now, do you know who is the medium of carrying this message from this employee task to the manager task? Can anyone say me what is the medium? Like who is going to carry the information from the employee task to the manager task? That sequence flow it will take. But do you know what is the form of information which is going to carry it from the employee to the manager task? What is that component? What is that component, or what type of variable?
Business object.
Right. So business object is definitely the one which is going to carry the information from the employee task to the manager task. And to be more precise, guys, it's going to be this variable. This private variable of my process is going to carry the information from the employee task to the manager task. Right. Now, just think of a scenario like manager task is getting completed. Right. Now, say, okay, coming to the first activity again. Employee task gets completed, manager task gets triggered. Now, as a result of this, we are passing the output from the employee task and we are passing it as an input to the manager task. Now, the medium, who is the medium? This process variable which we created, a private variable, this is going to get affected or this is going to get updated, right? Now, we also need to update this same variable after the manager task also gets completed. Why do we need to update? The reason being, tomorrow, if I have to find out, if I have to inspect on the data after the manager task is completed, if I want to go to the inspector and find out what action has been taken by the manager, if I am not going to create an output variable and if I'm not updating the private variable of this process, then in that case, whatever action the manager has taken, I will not be able to see those details in this business object. Okay, which means what I'm talking about, I'm going to pass this as an input to the manager task. And also after the manager task is getting completed, I'm going to pass this as an output to this process. So the process variable will be updated. Now the question is, how is this variable, how is this process variable is getting updated, right? So we'll discuss on that. Let me create this, complete this manager task. Okay, then I'll show you how the process variables are getting updated. Okay, so I believe everybody is now clear why do we need an output variable. So always, whenever you have the last activity in the process, okay, especially if you have an user activity right at the end, then definitely you need to create an output variable so that you can update the process variable for this. Okay. Now, how to update the process variable, we won't discuss on that. But are we now good? Like, why do we need to create an output variable for this manager task?
Yes, Rahul.
So,
Okay. Good.
Yes, Rahul.
All right. Now let's move to the manager human service. Now this is going to be my manager and service, and I was creating some variables. So this is going to be my input variable, and output also I'm going to create. So I'm going to create it as an out employee information, and I'm also going to bind this with the same business object employee information. Okay. Now I'll go back to my diagram. Now over here, guys, for the employee human service, we added a script before this coach and we were populating the type of leaves. So for manager human service also we need to create the same.
No.
Okay. Everybody is saying no.
Yeah, the same thing, like whether it is approved or reject or whatever status we can load to the drop down list, right? No, sorry, there's something different. Sorry.
Yeah, drop down will not be there for approve and reject.
But selected leave will be there.
Yeah, so selected leave will be there. Definitely the manager needs to see what leave has been selected by the employee. So which comes to, we can come to a conclusion by saying that we don't need a type of leave drop down here, right? Because that drop down will be used by the employee and there is no drop, there should not be any drop down for type of leave for the manager. Anyways, the manager is going to see everything in read only. He will not be able to change anything. So drop down is not required, and which means we are not going to add any other script before this coach. Whatever I am getting from employee, directly I'm showing that information to the manager coach, right? So simply what we can do, we should go inside this coach and we should start doing the design for this human service or for this coach. Now, last time we created the employee human service from the activity wizard. That's the reason all these things did not appear at that time. Right now, we are seeing a pop-up which says select a template, and we have three options here. Start with the default coach. Second option is start with the grid, and third option is select template. The first option is when you want to start the development for your coach from the scratch, when you don't need any coach view, like you're just selecting the first option and then you go and start dragging and dropping all the coach views, whatever is required, and then you do the mapping, right? So the first option is the one whenever when you don't have a layout and you want to build the coach from the scratch by yourself dragging and dropping all the coach views in the coach. The second option, start with a grid. Now there are different grids available. Like if you want to see the entire coach, you want to add a column, single column or multiple columns you want to add, then you can use this option. If you want to add a header and footer, so IBM BPM provides you the feature of adding a header and footer directly. They're giving you an option over here. So you can also select this option and you can start developing your coach. Okay. Else we have the third option which says template. So if you have already some template created, so template is going to be the one which you're going to see the next day, that is tomorrow, which I was talking about a layout which we are going to create, and that common layout will be used across all the coaches. Okay, so that the developer don't have to take an overhead. It's an overhead, guys, right? Last day I did a development for the employee task. I designed the coach. Again today, again I'm going to create a manager coach, right? By adding all the coach views. So it's going to be an overhead for me as a developer. I am doing the same thing over and over again. So why don't I create a common layout and use it for all the human services? So that again reduces the workload from the developer's point of view, right? So we're going to see this tomorrow, where we are going to use a layout, and that layout which we are going to use for both the human services. So for us, for today, we should start with the default coach. By using the default coach, we are going to drag and drop all the coach views, and we are going to complete the design of this coach for the manager. Okay. So we are going to select the first option, start with the default coach, and we click on OK. Right now we can see the coach has got nothing except a button called OK. So okay. So we are going to drag and drop the coach views one by one. So what we need? We need a text box, right? We want to show the employee ID of the employee. So this would be employee ID. Then we have employee name. The same coach views which we used last day for the employee human service, we are using the same over here. We need another text box. This would be selected leave. What we had start date, end date. Okay, what else we have? We have leave duration, right? That's an integer box which we added. So guys, did you try all these things at your end in the trial version?
Sir, I actually tried, but there is no that text box in the version, sir.
Yeah. So if you have seen last day, I was telling you guys in the session. So we need to be very much attentive, guys. Okay. I said that text box is not there for the BAW. I said about a specific coach view. What was that? Instead of text box, what is the other coach view we need to use for BAW?
Plain text.
Correct. That is plain text. Okay, so we have to do the design using plain text and not a text box. Text box is not there for the BAW. Okay. What else we have? We have reason of leave. That's a text area. We have manager comments, right? So manager comments again would be a text area. So manager remarks would be better. Okay. And now finally we will have two buttons, approve and reject. Now here guys, if you're able to see whatever design we are doing since the last day, whenever you're adding any page view, right, it is getting added below, right? So all these page views are getting added by default in a vertical order. Now buttons approve and reject, I cannot add in a vertical order, right? It will not look good. So I have to do or the design of the buttons in a way that the buttons are kept in a horizontal way, right, side by side. So for that, we have something called horizontal layout, which we need to add. So we both have vertical layout as well as horizontal layout. Wherever you think you have to add the vertical layout, you can add that. You can also add the horizontal layout, which will whenever you are adding some code views, then those code views will be added in a horizontal way. Okay. So for this scenario, we are going to add the layout. So this is the layout which I'm talking about, horizontal layout and vertical layout. Okay. So we are going to use the horizontal layout, right? So I'll just change the label. I don't need this label. And here I'll just drag this OK button because I'm going to reuse this. I'm just going to put this inside this layout. Okay. So along with that, I need another button. Just type button over here. You will get the button option and just add this. Okay. So I'll just change the name. So first one would be approve and the second one would be reject. Okay. All right. Now, one by one, I will complete the mapping. So yes, there was some doubt with the mapping. So I'm showing it once again. So here you need to select the coach view, come down to the binding on the right hand side, click on select and here. All right. So what we need to map over here, guys, do we need to map the input or output? Whatever binding we are going to do with all these coach views, right? So what kind of variable should we do the binding with? Is it going to be this input?
Yes.
Everyone agrees to that,
It's input.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
The input.
right? This has to be an input, guys. Okay. Never do the mapping with this output. If you do this mapping with the output, then this thing will not work because our implementation is whatever the employee is entering, right, in that employee task, in that employee coach, all those details I need to pass it to this manager task, and whatever code views I'm adding to display all those details, that needs to be mapped with the input variable of the manager task. Okay, so we should map this input variable and not the output variable. So one by one, I will just do the mapping. Be very careful with the mapping. Okay, if the mapping goes wrong at any point of time, then your implementation will not work. This leave duration, you can also use a text box if you're not using this leave duration as an integer. Okay, so here we are using this as an integer. That's the reason I'm using an integer box. Even if you are using something as an integer, that can still be mapped with a text box, guys. Okay, so text box can take both integer as well as string. But the good thing about using an integer box is that by default, there is a validation, okay, that you cannot enter any string data for the integer box. That's the reason I've added over here. Okay. So going forward, you can use it in your implementations. Reason of leave, manager remarks. Okay. And now we have two buttons, right? Approve and reject. Now this approve and reject, how we can capture? Let us get some ideas from you guys. How can we capture this approval? Yes.
We need to define some private variables so that it can capture those approve or reject.
Okay, that sounds good. What kind of variables? So private variables we have to create. That is correct. We should be creating up two private variables or one private variable that will come. Now the question is that what kind of data type I should
Boolean.
create?
Boolean.
Boolean. That is correct. That is correct. That is the Boolean variables we need to create, and we can create them as private variables. And if I show you the business object, so this is the business object which we are using, and we have already taken some parameter called manager action, right? This manager action is going to populate either approve or reject, right? So how we can implement it? So let me show you how we'll implement it. So first we need to create private variables, approve, and that needs to be binded with Boolean. Similar way, again, another private variable, reject, which is also going to be a Boolean variable. Okay. Now, as rightly said by you people, that we can bind Boolean variable only. So we'll do the binding. Okay. Similar way, reject also will do the binding with this Boolean variable. Right. Now, whenever I said you that whenever we click on any button, right, and if you're binding it with a Boolean variable, then automatically the value of this button or this parameter, which is a Boolean parameter, automatically it becomes true. By default, it is false. If you're clicking on the button, automatically the value becomes true, right? So we have to add some code where we can write it in a way that if the value for approve is true, then populate for the manager action parameter, we have to populate approved. In case if reject is true, then in that case, we have a parameter called manager action. We are going to populate that some value called rejected to that variable, right? So we'll see this code. Now, before we see this code, now we'll go to the diagram first. Okay. Now here you see automatically the name has changed to approve. I just renamed that OK button to approve. Now I also have a reject button. So for that also I need to add a sequence. Why? Buttons are called as boundary events. Okay, in IBM BPM, buttons are called as boundary event. What is a boundary event? A boundary event is a coach view inside your coach. Whenever you click on that boundary event, automatically it will take you out of the coach. It will take control out of the coach and it will move to the next component. What component we have after this coach? Right now we have an end event. So whenever someone clicks on the boundary event, which is a button over here, that is my approve button and reject button, then I should take the control out of this coach and move to the next component that we have, which is an end event, right? So automatically approve is there. Why it is there? Because already we had an old button called OK, which I renamed as approve. So for reject also, I need to add a sequence flow. Okay. Now our next component right now is an end event, but we will be adding a script over here. I'll name the script as populate manager action. And please delete this and add a sequence flow. Okay, so what will happen whenever the manager is going to open this coach, whenever he clicks on approve, it will take him to this script, and whatever code I'm adding in the script, that will be executed. Similarly, when reject will also be clicked, it will also take it to the script and then finally to the end event. Okay, so let's see what kind of code we should write over here. Okay, so I'll go to the script, and here I'm just going to write if tw.local.approve equal to true, and then tw.local.reject equal to false. tw.local.employee information dot manager action is equal to approve. Else tw.local.employee information dot manager action is equal to rejected. Okay, simple. So here if approve is true, and reject is false, okay, that's how you use an and operator. I believe we are all aware of this thing, so I'm not going to explain these things. I believe everybody over here is aware what is an and operator. If I want to add multiple conditions together, and if I want to verify all the conditions, right, then in that case I need to use an and operator. If I want to implement something like I have multiple conditions, but like either of them is, if it is true, then we will proceed. Then in that case, I should be using or operator over here, right? So we are aware of all
Yes.
these things. Okay, good. So if approve is true and reject is false, then manager action should populate approved. Else, whenever approve is false and reject is true, in that case, I will populate manager action as rejected. Okay. Now by default, a Boolean variable is always false. Okay. So I don't have to think about that part. But whatever after the manager takes an action, whenever he clicks on any button, that is when my code will be executed and it will populate either approved or rejected depending on whatever button the manager has clicked on. Okay. So now we, okay. Guys, please go on mute. Some background noise is there. Okay. All right. So now one more thing we have to do. If you see the variables, whatever I have created, we have an input and we have some output, right? Now, as I said you that I need to also update this variable, the output variable, right? So how we can update? Simple. Just do the assignment. Okay. What I'm talking about is go to the diagram. We have the script, right? Right at the end of the script, what you can do, simply tw.local dot out employee information. First need to initialize this, okay, as a complex object, and then tw.local dot out employee information is equal to tw.local dot employee information. Just I am passing whatever data I am having in this variable. That is what I'm using, right? That's my input variable, and this will also have a new information, two more information, that is manager action and the manager remarks, right? So I'm just passing that information to the output variable. And why am I passing this to the output variable? So that this output variable, I can take it to the process layer and I can update that to the process variable. How to update the process variable, we'll come to that today itself. Okay, we'll discuss on that. So here we need to do this mapping. So this mapping is now completed. Now, if I go to the coach, now that's a very important thing which we'll discuss now, that is visibility. Okay, so we will have a session on dynamic visibility. So that is there in the course curriculum. So right now we will see what are the different visibility properties that we have in IBM BPM. What do we mean by visibility? I'll give very few simple examples. Like say for this manager coach, right, which we have implemented, where we have added so many coach views. Now, most of the coach views will be in read-only mode, correct? Because the manager should not change anything, whatever details the employee has entered. So I have to make this coach views as read-only. So this is one visibility property, okay, called read-only. Now, you guys must have seen something like whenever you open any application form, right, in the internet. So you see that there are certain fields, you will see that there is an asterisk mark just before those fields, right? A red color asterisk mark you will definitely see, and which actually signifies that that particular field is a required field, right? So similarly in IBM BPM also we have another visibility property called required. If I implement required, then automatically that field becomes a required field, and it will show some asterisk mark just before the label of that coach view. Okay. Say for example, employee ID, if I want to add this as a required field, I can make it. I can change the visibility to required. Okay. Like this, we have the other visibility properties also. So let's discuss on them. So first and foremost thing, if you want to do any implement any visibility for any coach view, you have to select that coach view, come down to the property of that coach view. There is a property called visibility. We have to come here. Okay. Now you see there is something called visibility, and next to it there is a drop down basically. Okay. There is a drop down which has got different visibility properties, starting from the same as parent. Then we have required. Then we have editable, read only, none, and hidden. Okay. Let's discuss on this. They are very simple, and these are the basic visibility properties that we have for every coach view, which you can use. And going forward, we'll see how to implement this in a dynamic way. Okay, we'll discuss about that at the end of the session. So the first visibility property is same as parent. We'll come to this at the end. Okay, what is the same as parent? We'll come to this at the end, right at the end. Coming to the required. So as I was saying you, if you select this required for this visibility property for this coach view employee ID, whenever I run this coach, if I run this coach, automatically you will see just before the label employee ID, there will be an asterisk mark. Okay. So if I save it and run this right now, you see just before this employee ID, I see an asterisk mark is there, right? So this makes this for specific field a required field. Now a question will definitely come into your mind that Rahul, if you're making this field as a required field, now automatically if I don't enter any data and if I click on the approve or reject, it should throw me some validation message, right? That is a required field. So nothing as such will happen, guys. Okay. So this is just a visibility property, just to make the end user understand that is a required field. Now to implement a validation message, we have to add some validation implementation. There is separate validation implementation you have to do. Okay. We'll see that also in one of our sessions, how to add validation for every coach view. So whenever some employee ID field is empty, I am going to throw a validation error message to the end user saying that this field cannot be left blank, or this is a required field, you cannot leave it blank. Okay. Like this, we can add some validation message for every coach field. How to do that? We will have a session on that separately. For required visibility property, this is just a visibility property just to make the end user understand that okay, there is an asterisk mark, which means that this is a required field. Okay. Just from the visibility point of view, or just adding something to the coach view which will make the end user understand there is a required field. Coming to the next one, editable. By default, guys, every coach view is editable. Okay. So whether you select this or not, so doesn't matter. By default, every coach view, which whatever you're adding in the coach, it is an editable coach view. Still, under certain conditions, we can use this option. We'll discuss on those conditions later. But yes, editable is something where you can edit the field or edit the coach view. Like you can add some data on the coach view. Okay, that is my editable. Read only, which we have to implement for this coach view, right? For whatever coach views we have added in the manager coach, we have to make all the coach views as read only. And if you make a coach view read only, definitely you can understand what will happen. You cannot change anything on that coach view. You cannot add any data to that coach view, and whatever data that coach view is already holding and is being displayed in the coach, that data will also you cannot change. Okay, from the coach. So this is the read only property. Now comes none, and then we have something called hidden. Okay, so none and hidden both are same. Same in the sense, if I have to hide this coach view from the end user, then in that case, I can use either none or hidden. But there is definitely some difference, guys, right? Otherwise, these two, although they are very similar, there should be some kind of difference between them. If you make coach view as none, okay, or if you make a coach view say as hidden, okay, so if I select this hidden for this coach view employee ID, yes, the end user will not be able to see anything, any coach view called employee ID, but the browser will still allocate some memory for this coach view. What do I mean by that? Let me save it. If I run this human service right now, you see above employee name, there is still some space. I don't see the employee ID, that is correct, but there is some space above employee name, right? So the browser is still allocating some memory for this employee ID, which is actually not good in terms of performance. Just think, if there is a complex coach which you have designed where there are multiple coaches, where you have multiple sections, you have got say employee information, there is a section called information, there is a section say salary information of the employee, where you have multiple coach views again inside the section. Then there is another section say address details of the employee, right? Where again you have multiple coach views for the address. You have pin code, you have say correspondence address, permanent address. Like this, we have all the different coach views. Now say under certain condition, I will make say out of say there are say somewhere around 50 codes which you have added in the coach. Now out of 50, I want to make 20 visible to the end user and 30 not visible. I want to hide it. So just think, if I'm using the hidden option, if I'm using the hidden property, the browser will still load those 30 coach views, right? Which is not good in terms of performance, right? I'm just showing 20 things, 20 coach views to the end user. But whenever the coach is loading in the browser is still loading those coach views, but not showing them to the end user. So the browser is still making some effort, right? An extra effort, which is not required. So if you want to reduce that effort, if you don't want to see this space over here, then we need to use none as the visibility property for employee ID. Okay, so I've made this as none. If I now save it, and if I once again run this coach, now you see there is no space above employee name, right? So the browser is not allocating any memory for that coach view, which I have made as none. And also, like whenever this coach is loading, the browser is not making any effort to load that coach view. So whenever you are implementing such kind of scenario where you are trying to hide some coach view from the end user, always use none. Don't use hidden. Okay, because it is not good from the performance point of view. So let me close this now. So none and hidden, we are aware like what is none and what is hidden. Now we'll come to the same as parent. Now, same as parent. By the term, you can understand that there is some parent, and if I am selecting the visibility property of any coach view as same as parent, which means that it will inherit the property of the parent coach view, right? I'll give an example. Say I have a section. We already have this example below. Let's come to that. So we have a section, and this section has two buttons, approve and reject, right? This section or the layout is also a coach view, right? Approve and reject are also coach views. Now, if you select for the approve, you can see same as parent is selected. So who is the parent of this button? This layout is the parent, because I have kept this coach view, these two buttons inside this layout. So in this scenario, layout is the parent. So if you make the layout, this layout as read only, and if you select the approve and reject as same as parent, which means these buttons will also inherit the property read only from the layout. Okay. So this implementation of same as parent, it works properly whenever you have a layout already, and inside that layout, you are adding multiple coach views. And if you're changing the visibility property of the layout, say you're making it none, at times you're making it say read only, right? Or editable. Then if you have the coach views already inside the layout and they are the same as parent, whenever you're changing the visibility property of the layout, automatically that is getting being inherited by the coach views which we have added inside the layout. Okay, so same as parent is basically whenever this kind of implementation will work whenever you have a layout and inside the layout you are adding multiple coach views. Now the question can come to your mind that whatever coach views we have added here, right? Say if I click on employee name, you see the visibility by default it is showing as same as parent, which means whenever you drag and drop a coach view, by default same as parent is already always selected. Then we go and change the property. If I want to change, then I can go and change the property from this drop down. Now coming to the real thing, whatever design we have done till now for the employee CSHs or the manager CSHs, we don't have a parent layout, right? We have directly added the coach view on the coach. Now in this case, who is the parent? For this scenario, wherever you are dragging and dropping the coach view directly on top of the coach without any layout, the parent for the coach view becomes your coach. Okay. And what is the by default visibility property of a coach? it is always editable. That is the reason whenever you add a coach view on a coach, by default it is always editable. Then we go and change the visibility property if I want to. Okay. So whenever I repeat once again, whenever you are dragging and dropping a coach view on the coach, you will see that going to the visibility property, that by default same as parent is selected. So who is the parent in this case? The coach is the parent for the coach views which we are adding directly on the coach, right? And what is the default visibility property of a coach? That is editable. Okay. And since it is editable, so whatever coach views we add, you will see we always edit them. Yes, then we can go and change some specific property that, for example, for this manager human service which we are designing right now. So initially I added all the coach views and you can see same as parent is selected. Now I have to make them as read only. Now I will go and make them as read only one by one. Okay. But by default, always same as parent is selected. Okay. Any questions, guys, till now? Are we good? Are we going too fast?
No, Rahul.
No, Rahul.
No, Rahul.
Okay. So I believe no questions, no queries, guys. If you have a question or query, you can ask me right now. Okay. So you see, I am going and making all these fields as read only one by one. This is a manager CSHs. I don't want the end user to go and modify anything over here. That's the reason we are making them as read only. So manager remarks will not be read only, right? So let me make this as required. The manager has to add some remarks, right? And approve and reject, they are fine. So already I don't want to add any visibility for this. But going forward, guys, whenever we see the layout implementation tomorrow, right? A lot of things will come for this visibility. That's the reason I'm showing this session today. Tomorrow, whenever we are going to implement the layout, right? We are going to create some coach view. And there we need to understand what is dynamic visibility. Okay. That we'll be discussing right at the end of the session. So for the time, we have added read only for all these coach views and yes, manager remarks. What I've done, I have made this as a required field, which will signal that the manager has to add some remarks. And for approve and reject, I don't want to implement any visibility property because it doesn't need. I cannot make a button required. You cannot make a button required. You can never do that. And yes, I can make this as read only. I can make this as editable. I can make this as same as parent. Okay, but I cannot. Yeah, I can definitely make this as hidden or none. That will also work, but required will not work. Okay, I mean there is no logic behind adding an S mark before a button, so we cannot make a button required. I can go and still select this as a required, but this is of no use. Okay, so let me save it. We are good with all the visibility properties. So now what we need to do, we need to do few more things. What is that? We need to go to the process layer, and now we'll come to that discussion which we want to have. Like, yes. Okay. So now we want to have the discussion like how process variable will be updated. How the process variables gets updated in a process layer. I'm passing data from the employee task to the manager task. How the data is getting passed, right? So there is something called data mapping. If you click on this employee task, right? If you click on any task on the process, if you add a system activity tomorrow, okay, whatever activities you add in the process layer except script, there will always be something called data mapping. Okay, like you have the general property and the implementation property, you also have something called data mapping property for each and every activity. Okay, so you see for the employee task, we created actually from the activity wizard. That's the reason this data mapping was there. Generally, it is like this. And what is this left hand side variable? Any idea? Anyone? What is this left hand side variable which we are seeing here in the outputting?
It is the output variable what we
Object.
created.
Object created.
Output
Yeah.
variable.
Yes. This is the output variable of the human service, of the employee human service. If you remember last day when we created this employee CSH, let me open it. So in the variables, we created an output variable. So this is what is getting displayed over there. Okay. And why it is displaying me over there? Because it's telling me that yes, the output variable is ready. So you need to pass some variable over here so that this variable gets updated. It will have all the data from the employee, and the same variable we need to pass it to the manager. Okay, that is the output mapping. So what variable we can map it over here? We should map, this is the process variable which we have created as a private variable, right? This we are mapping it over here. So this variable we are mapping. Okay, so the work of a process variable, guys, whether it's an input variable or an output variable or a private variable, this variable, whatever you are creating in the process, we use them mostly in data mapping. Whenever I want to pass some data from one task to another task, irrespective of tasks, it can be some user task, it can be some system task, it can be some decision task, it can be a linked process, it can be a sub process. Everywhere there will be some data mapping, which means if I want to pass some data from between different tasks, I need to use the process variable to pass the data from one task to another task. Okay, now you can understand. Now we have an answer how we can update the process variable. This is how through the data mapping only the process variable gets updated. Right, right now we say the employee task is submitted. Okay, say I'm an employee of a company and I want to take a leave. I have now applied for the leave, and now this task, employee task, is completed. Now the manager task is triggered. Now at this point of time, the process variable will be updated with the employee data. Correct, whatever the employee, whatever I have entered, like sick leave, what is my employee name, reason of leave, start date, end date, leave duration, everything gets updated, right? That whatever data I have entered, that also gets updated for the process variable. And similarly, the same process variable will also pass the data to the manager task, right? So manager task, I haven't mapped anything, so I need to do the mapping. So I click on select, and here I have the manager CSHs. So I'll select this. Okay. Now if I go to data mapping, so here now I can see both the mapping input as well as output, right? Why we both, why we have both mappings? Because if you remember in the manager human service, we created both input variable as well as output variable. So input variable we require. Why? That whatever the employee has entered, that information, if I want to pass it to the manager, then in that case, I will have the input mapping, right? So let me do the mapping. So either you can use this variable picker. If you click on it, you will be able to see the list of variables which are added in this process. So we have only one variable added in the process called employee information, that you can use it in over here. You just need to select the variable and that variable gets updated. Else, one more way you can do the mapping. You can add it over here manually, tw dot local dot employee information. Okay, this way also you can map a variable in the data map. Now coming to the output map. Now I believe we can understand the importance of this output map. because I want that after manager has taken an action, the employee information variable that we have in the process that should contain latest data, the latest updated data, right? If the manager is entering some manager comments, any remarks is adding, that gets updated. If the manager is approving or rejecting the leave, that also gets updated manager action parameter, right? So I want to update everything to the process variable again. So that's the reason I took this output variable. That's the reason I created this output variable in the manager human service. And also I can map the variable right now over here, the same variable which I have in the process layer. Okay. Are we good with data mapping? Any questions, guys? Don't feel shy if you have a question, guys. Okay. You are learning IBM BPM and there can be questions, there can be multiple questions. So don't feel afraid or don't be shy. Please ask questions. I see questions only from few people every day. Same set of people. Are we good?
Yes, Rahul.
Okay. Okay. All right. Now we'll proceed with what we'll do today. So we have another few minutes. We will see how this process can be triggered in Process Designer. Okay. And how the instances are getting created, how the tasks are getting created. If I am a developer, right? The first thing that we are going to use is the development environment. This is the development environment, right? So if I have to do the debugging of my code, whatever code I've written till now for both these human services, if I want to improve, if I want to see how the application running, if I want to test the application, then we need to trigger the process in the liner. And I said you right at the beginning that we have two views over here. We have the design view and we have the inspector view. You see, right at the top, there is one designer view, and here we have the inspector view. As soon as I trigger this process, inspector view will be enabled and it show me the progress of the instance. Okay, so let's see how to trigger a process. Very simple. Top right corner, you have a run button. Okay, if I click on it, this process will now be triggered. And on the right hand side, if you see something is coming up, that's the interview. Okay, so what I can see right now, guys, there are a few buttons that we'll discuss about this later. Right at the top, we see something called leave application process. There is a colon. Followed by that, there is something called 3. So here, this is the instance name. Okay, this is my instance name. And an instance name consists of the name of the process, followed by a colon, and then followed by the instance ID. You want to change the instance name at any point of time, you can do this easily. How you can do it? Very simple. Go to the overview of the process. Okay. If you see there are different properties, are common properties, details, work schedule, like this, you have the different properties. You see there is something called details over here. In the details, you have the first says instance name. Leave application process within double quotes, followed by there's a plus sign because I'm adding one parameter over here. And then we have some system variable which says tw.system.process.instance ID. This system variable, if you are using this in your code at any point of time, it will give you the instance ID of this process, the current instance ID of the process. Okay. So if you want to change the instance name, if you want to add something more, you can do it. If you want to add your own custom made instance name, that also you can do it over here. Okay, so this is my instance name. Coming to the below section, you have something called details. The first is instance ID. So instance ID is 3. We don't have any control on this number, guys. Okay, whenever you are triggering the process, IBM BPM is creating an instance ID of the process. Okay. If you want to go and if you think that, okay, this is three, I want to make just 300. Okay. By modifying something in the code or something in the property, I want to make just 300. You cannot do it. We have got no control on the instance creation. I mean, the how the instance ID is getting created and getting named as 3, 4, 5, and so on. We don't have any control on that. Okay. So we cannot change this. Coming to the process app, we see the name of the process app leave application. This is the status of the instance active. We discussed last day the different statuses of the instance. So this instance is active because some task is created and it is waiting for some end user to come and uh, move ahead by claiming the task and completing the task. So till the tasks are active in a process, the instance status will also active. Okay. So this is the status which is right now showing me as active. Start time. When I triggered this process, when the instance ID created. The instance ID was created on this time, okay, which is 1 minute ago. Last action. Whenever someone is claiming the task and completing the task, this particular field for last action will get updated. Okay. Whenever employee is claiming the task right now, now it is 9:43. Automatically, this 9:43 will be updated over here. Okay. This is the last action. Coming to due date. Every process has an SLA. What is SLA? Anybody has any idea what is SLA?
No, Rahul.
No, Rahul.
Okay. So whenever you are working, say now you are working for say a company HTC, right? So whenever your manager assigns a task to you, right? So he or tell you this time you need to complete this task, right? That's the kind of agreement that happens between you and your manager, right? Similarly, not only you, but everyone in the company, everyone working in the organization, whatever task they are performing, every task has an SLA. So today, if Rahul is applying for a leave, okay, guys, please go on mute. If you have any question, you can definitely unmute yourself at any time. You can speak and you can ask me questions. Okay. Yeah. So every person working in an organization, okay, working for some business, always have some SLA, right? Today, whenever I'm going to log in to my work, just maybe half an hour or 1 hour later, I will have some tasks to do for my day. That also has an SLA, right? So there is the customer has said me, okay, Rahul, you need to complete this task by this time. Okay, you have got say 2 days or 3 days. By this time, you need to complete all the development, and then we have to deploy this to QA, and we need to do the testing over there. And again, for the testing also, there is an SLA that by this time the testers need to complete all the testing. So everyone in an organization has got an SLA. SLA is service level agreement. Okay, SLA service level agreement. Now coming to BPM, IBM BPM, whatever you implement, be it a process, be it a any kind of task that you're implementing, each one has some SLA. We call it as the due date of the process. Okay. So right now, what we are doing, an employee is applying for a leave, right? And the manager has to take action on that leave. Now, if there was no SLA, just think if there was no due date, if I am applying for a leave, say for tomorrow, and my manager, if he doesn't approve it by today, then what will happen? The leave will be there, the task will be there for him, and he is not bothered to claim and work on that task, and he can keep it as much as a time he can keep it in his bucket, and maybe say after 7 days or 8 days or 10 days, he will now approve that leave. Now it is of no use, right? I am applying for a leave for tomorrow, and my manager goes and approves that in the next week, or rejects that in the next week. So this is not a proper scenario, right? So I have to implement the process in a way that my process and also the tasks will have some SLA or will have some due date by which each and everyone, each and every participant who are taking part in the process has to complete them within a specific interval of time, right? If I am working on a process, if I am a participant, I have to make sure that the task, if I'm having some task, I need to complete task within a specific interval of time. Similarly, whenever I'm completing my task, now again a new task is getting created and it is being assigned to someone else from a different team. Even that person also has the same responsibility. Okay, so everybody needs to complete their task within a specific time, and then only the process will also can be completed within that specific interval of time, which I'm setting, where I'm setting in the overview of the process, which says due in. Okay, you see 8 hours by default is selected over here. Whenever you create a process, by default, 8 hours will be selected. If I want to change this to say 12 hours or 24 hours or 48 hours, then definitely I can change it from here. And the good thing, guys, about this due date, not only you can change this from here, I can also change the due date of a process from my code. I can write my code in a way that I can make this due date change with time. I can make it dynamic. Tomorrow, I'll give a very example, significant example, which we recently discussed, something called EPV, X process variable, right? In many projects, okay, your due date is stored in an EPV. Why? Because the customer can come to you and tell you at any point of time that please increase the SLA. It can happen. This is a very significant scenario in a project. Okay, so the customer or the client can come to you and tell you please increase the SLA for another 12 hours. So we can do, rather than coming to the code over here and changing the SLA, if I have an EPV already created with which I'm tracking inside the process, that EPV I can change it from the process admin, and I can also, and this will make effect to whatever instances are there. Automatically, everything will be updated in runtime. Okay. Yes. Some question.
SLM is service level application or service level
Agreement. Agreement. Yes. Service level agreement.
Rahul, are you going to share the tool today?
I already shared the tool with Kirtana. Okay, that is what I was discussing right at the beginning of the session, but I believe Kirtana was not there, so
Hey
she didn't
Rahul,
respond.
Kirtana here.
Yeah, hi Kirtana.
Hi Rahul. When did you share
Yeah.
the link for the tool, Rahul?
I shared an email with you, I believe, on Saturday, and the tools
Saturday.
also I shared on Saturday.
Okay, in the HTC email or the personal email, Rahul?
I think Sarvana has shared your HTC email with Mind Magic.
Okay, I
And
didn't
mine
get
will,
any email actually. I checked in the morning also.
I
Okay,
kept
I'll.
I kept Sarvana in CC, so even Sarvana can also verify
Okay,
after
okay,
session is done.
okay,
Let me,
okay.
if you haven't
I'll connect.
received, then I will again share it.
Okay, fine, Rahul. I'll connect with Shavana and I'll ask him to update you.
Okay. Then, okay, where were we? We were here. Yeah. So yeah, so we are good with the due date, SLA, everything we are good. So the question is, can a process only have an SLA? Can't the tasks and the human service, whatever we are creating, does that also have an SLA? Yes, that also has an SLA. Okay. So whenever your manager is getting some task, whenever the participants are getting some task, that also needs to be completed by a specific time. Okay, so we cannot take the entire day, entire life to complete a task. We cannot do that. So there is a specific time for that also. Okay, so here we understood these things. Now, just below this detailed section, there is one more section called tasks. So this section will show you what are the tasks that are active right now and what tasks are completed, right? So till now, there are no tasks that are completed because in task is the first task and I can see that employee task is triggered. That is the reason it is showing you over here, employee task. And next to it, you have some play button. If I click on this will open the task, okay? And I will be able to see the coach. And then as an end user, I can fill up that application form and I can submit it. Okay, that is my M task. Now, as soon as you complete the employee task, over here in this task, you will see that the employee task is still visible, but the status will be shown as completed. Right now, what it says, the task is assigned to all users, which means the task has been triggered and the task is assigned to a team which is called all users. So I have not created a team till now. I did not create any employee team or any manager team till now. We'll do it very soon. So as soon as I do that, and I have to map that team somewhere over here, maybe with the lane, maybe with the task. Okay. And that time you will see it says the task is assigned to employee team. Right now, by default, all users team is selected. There is a default team which is created by IBM BPM. Okay, it's a default out of the team. So that team is right now mapped over here, and you can see next to it you have the due date. It is due in 60 minutes. So again, I can change the due date of a task from my code. Okay, I can change it at any point of time. There is a system variable for this which you can define, and definitely I can use some EPV also. That is a very good thing to use an EPV. So at any point of you can change the value of the EPV. So if you want to test your due date, then we can definitely use an EPV, which I can change in the admin console. Okay. Now below there is one more section called locations, and this is very similar to what we see for the task section. So basically both the sections are similar. The difference is in the locations, it is actually showing you that right now that there is something called token. Okay, whenever some instance gets created, there is a token which also gets created. What is the token? You see at the top of this employee task, there is a balloon like structure, right? Next to it, you have something called 4. So this 4 and this balloon like structure together, we call it as a token. As soon as I complete the employee task, this token will then move to the manager task. Okay. If you have another task again after manager, the senior manager task, after manager complete token will then move to the senior manager task. Like this, it happens. Okay. So token is nothing but it is generated whenever your process is triggered and whenever you have system tasks and the user tasks in the process. Token will always be generated, and you will see if you're able to see if you're viewing it in the development environment, then definitely you can see the movement of the token. But in case of any test environment, say a QA environment or a UAT environment or a prod environment, I cannot view the diagram over there, but still there are tokens. Okay, tokens will still generate even in your test environment, even in your production environment. What is the use of token? We'll come to this discussion later. Okay, so token is definitely used for debugging purpose. How a token is used for a debugging purpose, we'll discuss on that later. We have a session on REST API and process inspector. That time we'll see how this token is important for us. Okay, so right now for a developer, if he's working in a development environment, token will always be visible to that person over here in the diagram. And on the right hand side, this location, it actually signifies where the token is right now. So employee task is active, which means the token is right now active on the employee task. As soon as we move forward to the manager task, this location, this employee task will not be shown. It will show me manager task. Okay. And last but not the least, one of the most important thing in a process is data. So if you see here, if I scroll down, I have some data called employee information, my private variable, and it is empty at the moment because I haven't claimed the employee task and I haven't submitted the employee task, so it is still empty. So as soon as I claim the employee task and I fill up the application form, automatically this data will also get updated. Okay, so let's start claiming it. So how we can claim it, guys? We can claim it in two ways. One, we can claim it as a developer if we are doing some testing. We can use here. We can use this. Else, there is also another console or another component through which I can claim the tasks. Can someone tell me what is that console called? What is that component? We discussed on that during the architecture session. There is a component through which we can participate in the process. We can claim our tasks from there. What is that console or component?
Rahul, is it process center control console?
Process center. Okay. So this question is for, okay. Now I'll ask to say Srinidhi.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So what is that control? What is that component called through which we claim a task?
Sorry, sir.
Guys, we need to be very much attentive. Okay. So we discussed on this in the architecture session. We have forgotten it seems. We have something called process portal, right? Process portal. So go back and again go through that session. Okay. Process portal is the component through which I can claim a user task. We discussed a bit on that process portal that day. Like process portal, we have something called work list. In that work list, we can see whatever tasks are assigned to us. If we log in with our credentials into process portal, we will be able to see the list of tasks over there. Okay, and one by one we can work on the task. Okay, so process portal is the another component through which we can actually claim the task and we can work on our tasks over there. Okay, we'll see process portal. So we will have a session on process portal also. So today we are claiming the task from here. So maybe on the next day we'll see how we can claim it from the process portal. Okay, so right now this employee task is triggered. So on the right hand side, you see next to this employee again you have a play button. Okay, I can click on this play button which says start, and this will open the employee coach for me. So I can see here employee ID and all the other details. I can see I will fill up this form. So 561 employees Rahul, type of leave is sick leave. Start date is say 28th, 27th. End date is also say 27th. This one we need to add some code. Okay, so I want you guys to first think how this code can be written. So come back with the solution tomorrow. Okay, how we can add a leave duration, how this leave duration can be calculated. I believe each one of you are using Leave on trial. So over there also you can do this thing, do this implementation over there. Okay, so say leave duration is 1 for the time being, and the reason of leave is fever. Now I click on apply, and whenever I click on apply, this employee task will now be completed. And if we go back to the diagram, we'll see the token has now moved forward to the manager. In case if the employee activity fails, the token will not move forward. Okay, it will be still stuck on the employee task. So now you can see the token has now moved, and the token number is also changing, guys. You see The token number was initially 4. Now it became 6. If another task after the manager, the token will again move forward after the manager task is completed, and the token number will also change. Okay, so token number changes with every activity, be it a user activity, be it a system activity. The token will still move on every activity, and the token number will be changing for every activity. Okay, we cannot control on the token number also. Okay, I cannot modify the token number from my code, or there is no configuration we can do through which we can control the token number or the token ID. Okay, very important guys. Token, right now we are just discussing about this token, but going forward we'll discuss more on this, because token is uh, a very important component in your process, which helps us to debug or to retry some failed instance. Okay, so we have a REST API session, that time we'll cover this. So now the token has moved the manager. Now let's claim the manager task. You see on the right hand side, guys, the instance status is still active, right? And my task, you can see, if you see the tasks, the employee task is now closed. The task was closed by Rahul Roy. It is showing me over here. Some kind of audit trail which I can see over here, which helps me as a developer to understand who has taken part in this process, and going forward, what tasks are active and who can claim on task, what is the due date of the task, everything I can see it from here. Now I'll claim the manager task. Now I see all these details are in read-only mode, right? And manager remarks, I can see there is an asterisk mark, which means if I'm a manager, and now I'm able to understand this manager remarks is mandate for me. I have to add some comments over here. So I'll just add, and I click on approve, and this manager task now gets completed. Okay, so what we'll see now, we'll see the data, right? Whether this private variable which we had added in the process that has been updated or not, and how this variable is getting updated. It is getting updated with the help of data mapping, right? So we had done some output mapping for the manager human service, so that the process variable gets updated with the latest data. Okay, so let's see that it got updated. So I'll expand this. So I can see employee ID has been updated. Selected leave. Let me just expand this a bit so that you guys can understand. So sick leave is updated. I can see end date has been updated. Leave duration is updated. Employee name is there. Reason of leave. Manager name we are not using any. That's the reason this is empty. So we can definitely use the manager name. So going forward, I'll implement the manager name also. So right now we are not using it. That's the reason it is empty. Start date I can see. Manager remarks I can see approved, and manager action also has been updated as approved, which means the code which we wrote today, right, and in the script, that script, it got executed, and I can see in the manager action approved has been populated. So I can say that this variable, this in private variable which we have added in the process layer, that is now updated with the latest data. And the good thing about updating this, the reason is, tomorrow if I have to refer this instance ID, maybe for some reason I need to refer, I can straight away go to the inspector and I can refer this instance over there. And I can see what data has been populated for this instance ID.